to a special meeting of the Winchester Planning Board. It's October 3rd, 2023. Just to remind everyone, we are being recorded both via Zoom and also by Winchester Community Access. Thank you much, WinCamp. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your camera and mute yourself. Okay, so we have with us today most of the board, so why don't we make it official and we'll do a roll call vote. Nick Rosettos.
Present.
Sally Dale.
Present.
Yi-Ching Scott.
Present.
And I'm Dean Jurius, and I am present as well. We also have with us Taylor Herman, our town planner, Emily Innes, Michael Wang, and John Rufo, who are our consultants on the work we'll be talking about this evening, and a couple of members from our community that I recognize. The format of this evening's, oh, and here comes Nancy. Nancy, our recording secretary, is about to join us. Welcome, Nancy. So the format of our meeting today will mostly be focused on presentations from our consultants who will be explaining what the North Main Street and MBTA 3A communities initiatives are about and how they fit in with how Winchester is moving forward. We are looking at moving forward with zoning at the spring of 2024. And so we have a host of activities which will lead us there, hopefully with a lot of input from our community. So my role here is just to kick things off. And so I'm not going to go in as much detail about what the MBTA 3A Communities Act is about. Our consultants are much better versed in that, but I do want to give everyone a little bit of background as how we got here. And so I do want to welcome you all to our first public outreach session for the our combined North Main Street revitalization and MBTA 3A communities compliance initiatives. So tonight we are focusing on the background that we want for the ZRAC, as we call it, which is the Zoning Review Advisory Committee, which will be our liaison with the residents of Winchester, and which will advise the planning board in conjunction with other town boards, such as the select board, the design review committee, the historical commission, and the conservation commission as we move forward. All of those boards have important roles to play. And so those that we will be inviting them and reaching out to them for inputs as we go along. So the history, let me start with the North Main Street initiative. So the last large-scale rezoning in Winchester was done when the Center Business District rezoning was done a few years back. And it has been a planning board priority to take a really deep look into the North Main Street corridor since then. And that was maybe 8-9 years ago. Between then and when we started working on the North Main Street corridor, planning board did complete with the participation of over 1,000 members of our community, our 2030 comprehensive master plan. And that plan, I think, reaffirmed and highlighted the importance of the North Main Street corridor as a zone of opportunity. And we began studying that corridor first with our consultants from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and later with Form in Place, who Michael Wang and John Rufo are with us this evening. MAPC performed a fairly thorough study of existing conditions, which provided a firm foundation for the studies that Form in Place have done, which they've explored a re-envisioned streetscape, as well as looking at how different combinations of residential, commercial, or mixed development would fit into the corridor. Starting early last year, the planning board and the town planner started working on how we would achieve compliance with the MBTA 3A Communities Act, which is designed to increase the number of residential units which are built near MBTA stations. And as we considered the requirements of those programs and the impact on possible places within town, over the last 10 months, it became clear that part of the North Main Street corridor would become a vital part to achieving compliance. And so at that time, we decided to broaden our look beyond just North Main Street, include, I should say, North Main Street into our plans for achieving 3A compliance. And at this point, I am going to turn it over to Taylor, who will say a little bit about 3A and then lead into our consultants. Taylor.
Thank you, DM. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I am the town planner of the town of Winchester. For those of you who do know me, hello. Really excited to get things kicking off tonight about this. I do want to let everyone know that the conversation does not end here. Any questions that you may have, you can feel free to reach out to me at any time, and I'll do my best to get back to you in a timely manner about this and any other planning related information. The MBTA Communities Act, you may hear it referred to as MBTA 3A, is it's the multifamily zoning requirement for MBTA communities. Depending on which community you are in, you have to, this state is requiring you to comply to a few different sets of rules. Winchester is one of those. It will require the town to zone a certain number of housing for future use within a half-mile radius of our train stations. It is a complex complex problem that we have to solve. That's why we're really looking forward to having our consultants here with us, and we really want your input along the way. So this is just the start of that, and we look forward to getting more input from all of you moving forward. So without further ado, Michael, Emily, I would like to hand it over to you and kick us off.
Thank you, Emily. I think you're going to run with these first couple of numbers here and just let me know as you'd like me to forward the slides. So.
Absolutely. And with that, let's jump to the first one. So good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Ennis from Ennis Associates. I'm partnering with Michael and John on this project. I'll be primarily responsible for guiding you through the MBTA Communities Act portion. And Michael's going to explain what his role is when we get to those slides. But before we get to what we're doing, we want to talk about what the ZRAC would be doing. So this is the Zoning Review Advisory Committee. The town is looking for some volunteers to be part of that meeting or part of that committee, and we can talk more about that as we get to the end. But this is the role, and it's important to understand the role when deciding whether or not you might want to be engaged in this process. And so we're asking that members do attend all of the ZRAC meetings. This is billed as both the first meeting, but also an opportunity for people to find out what's happening for these zoning processes. And there will be some public meetings, and we ask that ZRAC members attend those as well. We're asking them to listen to the presentations that we make, engage in discussion, be part of that discussion, and provide feedback to us. And that is a critical role of an advisory committee, is to provide feedback. You know, are we understanding things in Winchester properly? Are we providing the right information for people to understand and make decisions about the input that we're requesting? So that role is critically important. Encouraging people in the community to attend the public meetings is a very important component to this advisory committee. You're the eyes and ears of the outreach for the town, and directing people to the town's website for more information about the process. We want to make sure that people are receiving information in a consistent way. that everybody's receiving the same information that helps to support the community discussions. And so just saying, hey, I know you have questions. This is the place to find the answers or more information. Very important. And then finally, any zoning process, any community planning process, we hope to engage a lot of people with a lot of different views. We don't anticipate everybody to agree with those views. So treating people with courtesy and respect throughout the process is again a key role of the committee. Next slide, Michael. So let's talk a little bit about the process. We have these two parallel tasks. One is to talk about the MBTA Communities Act, and the other is to talk about North Main Street. So tonight we're doing the initial introduction, and then Michael's going to take over and take us into a deep dive on North Main Street, what's been happening, what's going to happen. On October 24th, currently scheduled for October 24th, I'll be taking everybody through a deep dive into 3A. It is a complex topic, as is North Main, so we wanted to make sure that each topic had sufficient time to go through it. We're aiming for a virtual public meeting on the 2nd of November, again, to introduce the community to these two topics, to the two planning processes, and how we're going to get from here to town meeting. And then on November 21, an in-person public meeting to allow us to go into greater depth in both topics. And then finally, currently scheduled is December 12th meeting for ZRAC to review the community feedback from both the virtual meeting and the in-person meeting. And that takes us really through the end of the year as this process. Obviously, as we move forward into task 4 and task 5, the draft zoning and design guidelines for both processes, and into the public hearings and town meeting support, we will add more dates to the schedule. Next slide, please, Michael. So I just want to give a very, very brief high-level overview of the MBTA Communities Act, just to introduce it to people. Michael then will take us into North Main Street, and we'll return to this at that next meeting. This is a new law. It established requirements, as Taylor mentioned, for each of the 177 designated MBTA communities about providing a district of reasonable size for multifamily zoning. Certain restrictions aren't allowed, certain gross densities are required, and certain geographical locations are required. And there's a couple of purposes behind this new law. The primary one is Massachusetts is suffering from a significant housing shortage, and this is an opportunity to rezone to allow for the production of more housing. There's affordability problems due to the lack to the housing shortage, and it's also a disadvantage to competition for businesses, jobs, and talent, not just at the state level, but also at a community level. Employers look at communities that have available housing for their employees. So it's important to remember that this act has the ability to solve not just state problems, but also local problems in terms of housing provision and local goals for housing and economic development. And then obviously placing housing near transit is just standard good planning practice for both housing and economic development. Next slide, please. These are the MBTA communities, the 177 communities with Winchester circled there. Winchester is considered a commuter rail community, and so its compliance deadline is December 31st, 2024. We'll go into more detail about what that means at our next meeting. Next slide, please. And then finally, just to give you an overview of the requirements, there is a minimum land area of 37 acres. 50% of the land area needs to be located in what's called the station area. And there are requirements for contiguous district sizes. These will all go into play into the geography of the districts that will comply. We're also looking at something called unit capacity requirements, which are the number of units that Winchester needs to zone for. Again, 50% of those need to be within the station area. And there's a density requirement. Density is defined as dwelling units per acre of a minimum of 15 dwelling units per acre. So this slide is just really introducing you to some new terms. Again, October 24th. We're going to go into these in far more detail about how they're calculated, what work the town has already done to understand their compliance ability, or the ability to achieve compliance, and what work we still have left to do. And with that, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Emily. That was very concise. So again, my name is Michael Wang. I'm with the architecture, planning, and urban design firm of Form & Place based in Newton. And excited to have another opportunity to collaborate with you, Emily. And I'm also here with my partner, John Rufo, as Diab mentioned. And we've enjoyed working with the planning board over the course of the last year and a half or so on this initiative. Nice to see you all and other board members as well. I'm going to probably talk at you for about 25 minutes here, which hopefully that's not too long, but just to try to give an overview of where we are in our processing and the evolution of the study for North Main. And as Diab mentioned, this is sort of driven by the 2030 master plan, which was talking about opportunity areas. I'll show you some images on that. And then also a recent 2021 study by the MAPC, which pushed this forward. I think the overlaps with the MBTA communities aspect of it, as Emily has alluded to, and Diab, are fascinating, and that's why I think it's useful to have these two run side by side. I'm going to break my presentation into 4 sections here, just for simplicity to follow. I'm going to talk a little bit about goals, the vision, and the character of the corridor, based on the last year and a half of discussions. I'm then going to walk you through Form & Place's analysis that we've done, which includes doing test fits on a variety of sites along the corridor, which were really done to understand the possibility of achieving different densities on different locations along the corridor, how the mixing in the mixed use impacts the density levels, the idea of having ground floor commercial, and then introduce ideas about dimensional criteria in the current zoning and how those might be adjusted to facilitate what's trying to be achieved here. I'm then going to give you a series of slides that might help you visualize what density looks like. This has become a very popular thing to do as the MBTA Communities Initiative has landed in all these communities, and people are trying to understand what the ramifications are of density and what different typologies look like and what they represent on various parcel sizes. So we'll spend a little bit of time looking at that, and then I'll conclude with just a few thoughts about approach to zoning and design guidelines as we try to execute this all before the spring of 2024. So let me jump in and bear with I'll try to be as concise as possible here. This is an image from the 2030 master plan, which, as Diab mentioned, and he did a bunch of my intro here, Diab, so I'll sort of breeze through these, but it mentions these opportunity areas, evolving opportunity areas, and I've added GBD2 and GBD3 down in those 2 boxes in the lower left-hand corner, and because the plan talks to the opportunities for infill and redevelopment, coupled with revitalized streetscapes, vibrancy, walkability, etc. So that is sort of the impetus behind the study. Together with the master plan, there was an action plan that was put together by J.M. Goldson. This is an example of a sheet from the action plan, and I've blown up the highlighted section there at the bottom, which encapsulates, I think, very well the idea of making zoning changes to allow higher intensity development. That's what's being recommended here. It involves parcel consolidation, increased building heights, a wider range of uses, et cetera, with a focus on mixed-use residential opportunities. And with the MBT 3A work, also multifamily. This graphic is similar to one that I've shown before, but it's been evolved a little bit to encapsulate the whole corridor, which you see on the right there, in the red dashed line with the arrows. That represents the extents of the corridor that we've been studying from Skillings Road, essentially up to the town line at Cross Street. And you can see how that interacts with the half-mile radius around the MBTA station. So it's really just that southernmost section of the red line of North Main that crosses over into the half-mile radius. But the whole GBD2, which goes about halfway up the corridor to Swanton Street, that whole GBD2 area is going to be considered as one of the districts for the MBTA Communities Initiative. So the primary goals that have sort of evolved out of our study over the last year and a half, distilling it down with the planning board, is again concentrating on density, more density, and especially the opportunities south of Clark Street. And we'll look at a little bit why that focus is important beyond the obvious that it's closer to the CBD and the station. Ideas about ground floor commercial, which I've mentioned, but then there are a series of parallel goals that we've been analyzed along with that, involving thoughts about complete streets and the public realm and what ideally would be done, although somewhat a separate initiative from ideas about zoning and design guidelines, which would shape development along the corridor. There's a study on the lower left there, which is a view of a complete streets sketch we did along the way over the last year or so, looking at tightening up right-of-ways and adding bike lanes and crosswalks, etc. Okay, just a couple more images here to pull together the ideas about the corridor and its character, the vision for it. This is an underlying graphic from the MAPC study, which basically is just showing where the GBD2, the General Business District 2, is in red from Swanton Street to the south, which is off to the right, and then the GBD3 heading up to the left and to the north. And what's interesting is that this essentially breaks this segment of the corridor down into really two sections. But in many respects, from a character point of view, I think you could argue that the corridor could be thought of as three distinct sections. And I think this evolved out of our studies with the planning board, that there's definitely this area south of Clark, which you see here with the dash red line that my cursor is passing over, which to the south of that, or to the right, headed towards the CBD, there are a number of deeper sites that are potentially opportunities for redevelopment. And again, within a half mile of the station, the proximity to the CBD makes it a good location for ground floor commercial. And there's sort of a character there. And these parcels abut town-owned land on either side, as opposed to when you move into the center of the corridor, which you see I'm calling Swanton Bellino, because there's Bellino Park there at the intersection of Swanton and North Main. You get a series of very narrow parcels, which just to shift to another MAPC diagram here, you can see the parcels in the middle of the screen there that are highlighted in blue. Those are determined to be historic assets. So if you look at that section there and now go back to this middle section of the corridor, you can see that not only are those narrow parcels, but they have that quality to them. So that seems like a fairly distinct moment in the corridor, but also punctuated by the intersection with Swanton. And then to the north, again, another change of character, I would argue, where you have larger parcels, many with commercial uses on them, and you have the interesting area of the Russell Road enclave, which sort of breaks the continuity of the GBD3 there, that is not in the district, and therefore not colored orange. But clearly there's an idea potentially up there of gateway as you approach the city from the north headed towards the CBD. So this is just one way that I've thought about the corridor, and I think it's an interesting way to contemplate it. I just will also mention here, I'm going to keep moving along here, but in the interest of time, but the MAPC did have a series of recommendations, which you see listed on the right there, which again, I think reinforce what is set in the master plan and what we're continuing to work through here. Ideas about increasing density, having flexibility about parking, improving streetscapes, and ideas about a lot assembly and flexibility, et cetera. So in any case, I think everything is sort of reinforcing each other at this point, which is good. Okay, this I think is another way of saying it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think again, this question of what is the appropriate framework for creating character and scale, and the goals here we've gone over a number of times, but this is what we're going to try to achieve through zoning amendments to the GBD2 and GBD3, and then hopefully by allowing for a little more intensity of development that can be done in a compatible way with the surrounding areas through the use of design guidelines. Okay, section 2. I'm going to share with you some studies that John and I did over the past year and a half on test fits for a number of sites that were identified along the corridor. This is a collage of essentially on the left here that shows the 2 studies sort of outlined in yellow that we did over the course of that period. There was a study that was essentially from Clark Street South, which you see here outlined at the bottom, and then a second study that covered from Clark Street all the way up to Cross Street. Again, looking at key parcels, not every parcel, but a variety of parcels to try to get a sense of what the capacities were for different uses on these parcels. Again, making no judgment about whether the parcels are ready for redevelopment or not, but more thinking about the importance of understanding the sizes and shapes of parcels and therefore making sure that zoning is facilitating the right type of development. I do think it's interesting to see, just as a synopsis here before I move on, that the study from Clark down to the Skilling here is essentially represents about 1,200 lineal feet of streetscape, and the upper study here is about 2.5 times that. But when you look over here at the potential from our sort of combined test fits of both density but also potential unit counts, these 2 areas sort of represent essentially the same amount of opportunity, and that's, as we'll see, because of the size of some of the sites down here and the thoughts about having more density closer to the CBD. All right, very quickly, I'm just going to show you, this is the process we went through for identifying a range of sites on the northern section of the corridor. You can see some very narrow, smaller sites, some larger sites, some sites that were consolidated so that you're combining sites. For example, between Hemingway and Canal, we've combined 4 sites there just to understand some of the ramifications of test fits. And then on the right, you see some of the prototypes that we use. And this is what I'm going to talk about further when we get into the ideas about residential and mixed-use typologies. You see here some examples of larger mixed-use apartment-style buildings, as well as everything from townhouses to multi-unit, more single-family style homes. And similarly, on the southern section here, this is a more in-depth sort of blow-up of how we consolidated some of the parcels, again, for this exploration, and some examples of some of the types of buildings that were used here, red being retail, blue being residential at the ground floor, and then there obviously are upper level plans as well. But this is how we explored the capacity for mixed use and residential density on these sites. And we did a number of studies. These are 3 different variations on that southern section of the corridor. And what I've done here is I've selected out a particular scheme or particular pieces from each one of these 3 schemes to do a density analysis. And basically, we're looking at 3-story concepts with a mixed-use component, and not to overly complicate it, but this is to get a baseline idea about what these sites are capable of carrying. And so you can see here highlighted in yellow we were able to, with our test fits, we were able to determine that it's feasible to get essentially 30 dwelling units per acre, utilizing the particular criteria that we utilized on this southern part of the corridor. So there's obviously existing criteria today, and then we adjusted a few of those to sort of play with the idea, begin to experiment as to whether or not what it would take to have increase the density in this location. And for comparison, you see down here at the bottom, today's zoning was determined to facilitate roughly 12 dwelling units per acre, and that was determined by the MBTA compliance model. And it's plugging in all the variables that exist today: 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit, and ideas about height, number of stories, setbacks, etc. All those factors have went into the compliance model, and it determined that the GBD2 as a whole essentially can support 12 dwelling units per acre. Whereas when we adjust a few of the variables, we're able to get up to 30 dwelling units per acre. And in some particular instances, that's on average. On some particular instances, we're higher than that. So that's just a super high level overview of the test fits and what they're beginning to identify ideas about what needs to happen to a dimensional criteria in order to achieve some of the goals here. So I'm going to step back here very quickly into this third section here. I hope I'm hoping everybody's still with me here. I'm not rambling on too much, but anyway, bear with me. This is a section on character density and the role of dimensional criteria. And what I want to share with you all, and this is, like I said, become particularly to light with the MBTA Communities Initiative and people communities wanting to understand what does density look like. There are a lot of publications and studies that have been done by the Mass Housing Partnership and other groups like the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities is putting out some interesting graphics that you see on the bottom here, which essentially is saying that communities today there's this thing called the missing middle housing, and it's everything between single family and larger apartment blocks. And zoning today has essentially, in many communities, made it almost impossible to develop this type of housing. And you can see examples of that sort of in a continuum or a transect, if you will, across the bottom here. So I've distilled this down into 3 typologies here, just for the sake of giving you a sense of how density increases as you move through these typologies, because I think it was helpful to me, and hopefully it will be to you as well. But there's a single family style, which is the first one we'll look at, which is like the equivalent of a single family home on, well, just say a 1/4 acre lot, but subdivided. Then there's a sort of the middle section, which is townhouse typologies. And then there's more sort of the apartment and podium, larger mixed use and multifamily structures. So we'll take a quick run through these, and hopefully that'll give you an idea of the typologies that are needed to achieve certain densities. And again, it's a function of footprint, height, size of the site, all those things all come into play. And then adjusting the other variables like parking and stuff is what allow you to have the flexibility to do these things. So that first typology is single family style, I call it, I guess. And this is an example of a home in Newton that looks like a traditional large home, but it's subdivided into 4 units. It's fits on a 1/4 acre lot. So if you have 4 units on a 1/4 acre lot, that's the equivalent of 16 dwelling units per acre. So that's sort of a starting point. You can see on the right here is an example of one of the test fits that we did from last year, where we used this particular prototype, which you can see also in model below here. And we put 3 of those on a particular site. This is just south of Sheridan, between Sheridan and Glenwood. And because this is it's a combined site of parcels, that it amounts to a little less than an acre. You're getting a dwelling, a density of 14 dwelling units per acre on this site. And again, these narrower sites, which are often on the east side of the corridor, are much more conducive to this smaller typology or the townhouses, and you're not as likely to get the larger multifamily typologies there. Here's an example of a townhouse test fit that we did. Again, And you can see the precedent images on the far right are a set of townhouses in Newton, which have parking below, and they're individual point access townhomes, multi-story townhomes. And that's different from this, what I think is a very nice development down in the Providence area, which has a townhouse feel to it, but in fact, it has sort of a lobby entrance, and it has ground floor retail lining the street. And so that's a very nice sort of combination of the sort of mixed use with a townhouse scale to it, again, appropriate for thinking about transitions to the surrounding neighborhoods. But this typology you can see here, at least on this test fit we did here, was resulting in about 26.5 dwelling units per acre. So we're starting to move up the scale. And just as an aside, you have some examples of projects in that scale along the corridor already. On the left-hand side, at the very top of the corridor, at Cross Street, which is the border to the town line, there's this 4-building development here of townhouses, which has a total of 18 units on a little over an acre site. So you can see the resulting density there. And then farther down the corridor, just south of Hill Street, is an 8-unit in 2 buildings project, which fronts right on North Main. The one building does, the other one's behind. And because that's on a relatively small site of just 0.38 acres, that's getting a density of over 21 dwelling units per acre. So again, just a reference point. Now I'm going to shift lastly here to some of the larger prototypes. And I think this is the kind of question for the ZRAC, and the boards and whatnot to begin to think about, how far do we want to go with density, and what are the ramifications for the character of the corridor. So here's an example of a 44-unit project in Middleborough. It's in 2 buildings, and the front building on the main street is 3 stories, and the building behind it's 4 stories. So it's a similar kind of stacking one building behind the other as like the project we were just looking at on Hill Street on the corridor in Winchester. Except here you have 44 units on an acre and a half. So you're at about 30 dwelling units per acre. So we're raising the bar here a little bit further. This gives you an idea that you can do 30 dwelling units per acre and still keep this aesthetic that I think you would argue is still in keeping with what I think people would like to see. But I mean, that's for you all to chime in on. Okay, and then we get into some of the larger ones, and I've got just 3 quick variations on this here, and then we'll move on to the last section. But this is a test fit we did on the south of Clark portion of the corridor, where we looked at at some larger footprint mixed-use buildings. Here's an example of what that might look like. This is a rendering from another project that we're working on down in Hull, which shows essentially ground floor retail with 3 levels of residential above. So we ran this 3 different ways. We ran this as a 3-story building with mixed use. We ran it as a 3-story building, just multifamily with no ground floor retail. And we ran it as a 4-story building. And so what results from that is, in the mixed use scenario, you end up with 34 dwelling units per acre, plus you get a considerable amount of street front retail. When you go to all multifamily and stay 3 stories, you're able to get the density up to 43 dwelling units per acre. And then the last version, when you make it 4 stories, all multifamily, you're getting up to 57 dwelling units per acre. So you can see the number is climbing still further. And I'm just going to show 2 examples of these larger building typologies. This is a new project on Austin Street in Newtonville, and it's 68 units. It's 4 stories, but they've stepped back the upper floor here. The ground floor has retail, and it has parking tucked in behind the retail, so it's sort of considered a podium building. But I think it has an appropriate scale for the street. It's also fronting on a plaza area here. You can see at the far end the access to parking, but in general, it has good retail storefronts providing vibrancy on the street. And I think the scale it's still, reasonable, but we're looking at 40 dwelling units per acre here. So that just gives you a sense of that. And then the last one is a slightly larger project, also brand new, also in Newtonville, called Trio. Both these projects are done by Mark Development. And this one is on the Washington Street corridor at the corner of Walnut, which is a commercial corridor. And the massing here is getting up to 5 stories on the corner, and then it steps down to 4 as you get towards the neighborhoods, and in the back here down to 2 as you get into some of the residential neighborhoods behind. So again, the opportunity to consider more height, it raises all kinds of other related issues, such as dealing with parking, how to step down to the surrounding areas. But this gives you a sense of what 140 units looks like on about a little over 2.5 acres, which results in a density of 50 dwelling units per acre. So I'm going to sort of stop there, but that just I wanted to just put that out there because I think it's always helpful to just understand how the different typologies translate to density. So my last section before I'll take a deep breath is approach to zoning and design guidelines. And this is also what we've been working on over the last year and a half or so, thinking about these various typologies and what is appropriate for density in the GBD2 and GBD3. How does that translate to the right character and make for a vibrant corridor? So what you have here, a lot of numbers, are the current dimensional criteria for the GBD2, the current dimensional criteria for the GBD3. So you can see, for example, in both of them today, you can do up to 3 stories of height with 45 feet. There are requirements for 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit, which is quite high in today's world. And then on the right here, that's compared with what this, as Diab said, sort of latest initiative in the CBD, where I've highlighted a few things that would help move the GBD2 and 3 in the direction of achieving some goals that have been identified. Things like reducing the front setback, getting buildings up closer to the street, which also has the added benefit of forcing parking to the rear. And then contemplating ideas about height. So in the CBD, there are incentives both for open space and for structured parking to increase the height up to as much as 66 feet here in certain areas. So that combined with reduction in parking ratios, fewer parking spaces per unit, as well as less parking for commercial retail uses, are things to contemplate, and perhaps it's approached slightly differently in the southern section of the corridor where you're closer to the core as opposed to the north, but this is where your feedback will be most welcome. And so this slide is again a comparison of the GBD2 and 3 and what you might contemplate, and this again is food for thought. But for example, you could take the 3 stories and 45 feet and say at the southern end, well, maybe as of right, you can do 3.5 stories and 55 feet of height. And with a special permit, you can get up to 4 stories and 60 feet of height. And again, that is tied into what size building foots you want to allow as you're trying to target particular densities, right? So, and then on the GBD2 as well, these numbers can be manipulated. Maybe they're not as high as they are in the GBD2 based on conversations we've had to date. But again, there for the conversation, and many other variables that go along with that, including parking location, how to access the parking in a way that makes for complete street feel to the definition of streetscapes. Okay, just about done. The last couple thoughts here. So hand in hand with those zoning amendments, if you will, the opportunity to infuse the bylaw with design guidelines. This is an example of how the CBD design guidelines are broken down. Again, you can see pieces having to do with site planning, how buildings relate to the street and their neighbors, and then issues related to architectural design, elements of form, massing, all the way down to details, the details that give the building the articulation you're looking for. And this last slide is a slide that I brought along with me over the last year or so, which essentially is a way of thinking about the kinds of things that design guidelines can address at 3 different scales. On the left, you have sort of at the neighborhood scale or the corridor scale in this instance, building site relationships in the middle, and then again, issues of architectural character, facade design. What do you want the ground level design to look like, et cetera, et cetera. And all these things, to a degree, can be incorporated as they have been in the CBD guidelines. So I'm going to stop there and toss it back to maybe Diab. Does that sound right?
Okay. So we are at 7:47, and we wanted to keep this to about an hour. And I wanted to Taylor, do you have that initial agenda that you put up at the beginning so I can see where we're at?
The only one topic was this discussion.
I think we're
Oh.
down to next steps.
Okay.
I had sort of an expectation that the
Oh.
consultant would introduce us to the ZRAC. Is that not correct?
I think the ZRAC is
They would introduce us to what we need to do to get a ZRAC. We talk about who's on there and all
Well,
that. But
so
I could be mistaken. I just
So
wasn't
the-
sure.
the ZRAC is it's an advisory board to the planning board. I think Emily talked a bit about what the ZRAC was there for and how it would engage with the community.
Right. Emily gave us a proposal for what the ZRAC should be.
Yeah, and she presented
we're
that
okay with that.
earlier.
I mean, what do we do now about it? I mean, how do we get members in all this?
So
So
Go ahead,
I'm
Taylor.
happy to talk about Diab. So the members have not been selected for the ZRAC yet. We have 5 members of the Winchester community who have expressed their interest gratefully. Some of them are here tonight. The next step will be, after this information session, will be to share the information of those 5 individuals with the board. We can either decide to review it in a special meeting, or we can review it next week in our planning board meeting. We also want to open up the opportunity for other individuals who are here and may be interested at this meeting right now, and it is being recorded and is being sent out to many individuals who have requested more information because they may be interested. Hopefully that answers your question, Nick.
Yeah, no, I think with 3A, we're asking people. I'm feeling I'm being asked a big ask to go with it, and I feel comfortable to have people in the ZRAC that I trust, with design issues. I think that would help me be able to go with it. I think it would help town meeting when they're making a decision on what to do about this, to have people that they trust with kind of the design. What we're coming up with these guidelines that I think we're going to be
I'm hoping that the design review committee will come on board and help us with those guidelines. I mean, that's,
and hopefully they can attend the meetings at the ZRAC.
I think that they can come on board even outside of the ZRAC. We are doing outreach we're going to be going before the select board, I believe, on the 16th. Hopefully we'll have a meeting with historical commission, hopefully at the end of this month. I don't know what scheduling is like. I also would like to have a meeting with design review to introduce them to the process and our consultants who are going to help us. But I see those committees as coming in, the entire committee is helping us in terms of moving.
Right, but we want to make sure they have access to the consultants and they have access to the people that we're paying for to do this with us and for us.
I would think that they would.
So I guess my question is, the ZRAC, how concerned should I be about it, and what is it going to do, and what I mean, I guess that was my sort of expectation for the meeting tonight, is to get an introduction. It was Bill as his introduction to the ZRAC.
I think the,
And I guess we can deal with these questions at our next meeting. I don't want to derail the meeting, but those are just some. I think I'll be quiet now and can proceed.
well, I think if there are questions, then we should definitely answer them. And I think one of the things I'm thinking of is Emily had a slide which went into some of it. And is that something that you think we should flesh out more from that slide? Or
No, I think whatever the agenda was, we should cover that before the end of the meeting.
okay.
I don't want to derail that.
Okay, so I think the schedule, I think Emily laid out the schedule going forward in terms of public meetings. And I think at this point, one of the things we'd probably like to do is maybe it open up to because we're getting close to 8 o'clock, open it up to members of community who have joined us this evening. And if they have any questions they wanted to ask, maybe along the lines of what the ZRAC is, since we really are looking at this as an introduction to the ZRAC and really an introduction to getting a community more engaged with this process. So if there's anyone who would like to join us in conversation, I see Michelle McCarthy. I think you're able to unmute yourself. Go ahead, Michelle, please. If you could just say who you are and
Sure.
what your interest is.
This is Michelle McCarthy, town meeting member of Precinct 7 and very long Winchester resident, also on the Historic Commission and the Heritage District. I guess my question would be, why not have, not that I'm volunteering, but interested, why not have a rep from the Historic Commission and Design Review officially sort of a member of this committee? I feel like that might really help, because I think it already feels like, it sounds like you've been working on this for so long and we feel like we're left out of the loop. So I think that as we move forward, if we have a member, would be great to have someone from design review with their background, architectural background involved, and someone from historic who can sort of, make sure that way. I think it will really help to say to town meeting, hey, historic has been involved in this and design review's been involved in this. I think if not, it feels like we're been a little bit left out. And I think it'd be great to work with the, the entire group and the planning board. Instead of you all come up with a plan and then you come to us, it just seems like it would be great to have a rep on there. I know I've done something before, a couple years ago when they were redoing the master plan. We had a member from historic on there, so it kind of helped. They went to all the meetings and they participated, and they could kind of come back to us and keep historic up to date. Is that considered? I wasn't really sure why. I did reach out to Taylor. I was interested, and he said that the consultants decided that we couldn't have a community member if they were already on another board or commission. If maybe the consultants could explain why.
Yeah, I think
Maybe we can
maybe
change that
explain
if that's a
that.
problem. I mean, we can change that provision so they don't have to be someone that is not on another committee.
I want there one of the things that I think it's really important is, and I'm not saying, I'm just want to say is that we wanted to have a lot of resident input. And when I say resident, of course you're a resident, but there are so many people in town who aren't engaged in this process. And so we wanted to make sure that we got a voice from the people who aren't normally engaged.
Mhm.
But certainly we've had discussions, and this is, the planning board is, I think, still discussing at some level. And I think it all comes down to how many people want to join. If we're able to have a robust participation from all people, I think we would love that. And I don't know, Taylor, if you can address, I've lost sight of everyone who's on the call right now. I'm sorry. So Taylor, if you could address Michelle's comment about, or maybe is it Emily? I don't know who to address the comment about members of boards on the ZRAC. much. Oh, there we go.
I'm happy to address it. I don't know exactly what you are asking, but you know,
Just trying to explain, Michelle says she had this impression, and I just want to understand.
yeah. So, Michelle, I know that we've talked beforehand, and I'm happy to talk later on as well. I sent you an email with a little bit more information. You can take a look at that. We can discuss it a little bit later too. And for everyone to know, that's just additional information about what the ZRAC is, because Michelle had asked. We are looking for additional people who are interested in participating, who haven't participated before. But I will let everyone know who may be concerned is that Dia, myself, and our consultants did speak this afternoon, and we have been considering how to address these concerns. Some potential example or some potential resolutions are: do we expand the ZRAC? Do we make it larger? Do we have an additional one? So we don't have specific solutions for you right now, but we are considering everything. And if you have any ideas that you would like us to consider, I think right now is a great time to bring it up.
Thank you. I just think it'll be an easier process if you can say, hey, the ZRAC had these 5 residents. That would be great. And also had a member from the design review and historic, because if anyone goes through any process of zoning, whether it's a special permit or they're trying to get a pool or whatever it is, and they have to go through these different. So this just seems like a process that if you're going through demolition, you have to go to historic and design review and ZBA and planning board. So it seems that this process feels different, and it just feels a little bit unfair. And so I think it will just help too to get to town meeting and say that these other groups have been, part of this, in addition to the 5 residents, of course.
I think it might be helpful to remember that when we did the plan for the town, whatever it was, Vision 2020, the 2030, that we had large meetings that included a lot of people, and it seemed like it had a successful endpoint. So I kind of be reluctant to kind of put these people in another ZRAC. It'd probably be better to include them in the discussion of the main one.
Plus, I hate to say this or be negative, but I think we've all been on different boards. And I'm sure the 5 people will be wonderful, but sometimes there's a weak link, or someone just gets really busy and doesn't have as much time to commit. So I think a few more folks at the table probably doesn't hurt. And I think it's great to have different folks who have. I know I would be really interested in. Obviously, my biggest goal would be for historic preservation. So, but there'll be other people, hopefully other residents who have different insight that they bring to the table, so that there's a better meeting of the minds.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that Jamie Duvall, who is from the Design Review Committee, also has her hand up. Jamie?
You're on mute.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Yes, I'm on the Design Review Committee, and I want to echo what Michelle just had to say. I think if we could have a representative on the committee who goes to every meeting, it would be tremendously helpful. Our committee has 3 registered architects, a landscape architect, an architectural historian, and an artist, and a community member. And I think bringing information directly from the meetings back to the committee is just a really efficient way to get more input into the process and decisions. And also, it will probably garner more community support.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Deb, can I?
Go
Is it
ahead.
okay if
Yeah.
I just chime in and just say just so there wasn't any misunderstanding, at least from my perspective, I think what we've talked about is that we would very much like to have a diversity of viewpoints on the ZRAC, including exactly people like from historic and from the design review board. I think that's critical because those, being able to solicit that input in that type of a small group setting is ideal. And then there's opportunities. We'll have a series of meetings at that level, and we'll also have a series of larger community meetings that will sort of run parallel. But I think that's exactly the type of membership that would be useful to us and would validate the process.
Sounds great. Yeah, to be honest, my overwhelming concern here, and something that I've noticed in the last many years, is the lack of a lot of non-board member participation in efforts like this. And that's really, I'm concerned overall in terms of the lack of that sort of participation of town government functions. And so I do value the contributions that Jamie and Michelle will bring to this. And the application is open to everyone in town. I just, my focus is, I know that people from design review and historical are going to be on this because it's so important to them. I just, I would love to see some people who have never been on a board before to come and give us their opinion. One of the differences between, I think, this effort and the amazingly overwhelming effort we had for the master plan is that we have a really set deadline on this. And for the master plan, we could have meetings with 20 people on them, and it worked well because we kind of had a relaxed schedule. And so I'm really concerned about the schedule, but I do welcome, and if the DRC and Historical Commission, and I'm sure the Conservation Commission, wishes to express some interest in how the overlays are going to work with the natural resources we have downtown, I think they might also be interested. So we need to figure out a way of making it work. I agree. And I'm going to shut up because this is really a decision by the board, not by me. I talk too much. Go ahead. So it's up to the board on how we want to work this out, but we do want everyone to participate.
Yeah, but just thinking it out loud, and feel free to take this, board members, as you will. But one thing might be absolutely including the members of the boards that you just mentioned. I think that's a great idea. I think they would bring a lot, but maybe they could also volunteer someone they know who hasn't been part of town government that might be interested in this as a form of reaching out. So just another way to drive some interest in this process. Who do you know who has an interest in these types of things but just has never gotten involved? Maybe they'd like to be part of this committee.
That's a great idea. So I think that we have pretty much reached the conclusion of this meeting. And again, this meeting was the first, I guess, of the pair. First to discuss the North Main Street, and our next will be diving deep into MBTA 3A. We are still looking for people who would wish to be part of the ZRAC. So if you wish to volunteer, you want to talk more about it, you can always email us at planningboard@winchester.us. If you have any questions about what's going on, if you want to know, for instance, if you have any questions, please just send them in. We're going to start putting up an FAQ on our website. I hope that if you're wondering why certain areas were chosen for 3A and why others weren't, or anything like that, I believe Emily's going to dive into the details and remind us how complex the whole thing is to make all the pieces work together. So are there does the rest of the planning board want to say anything, any sort of input from you folks?
Thank you so much for that presentation. Sally, did you want to, you can go.
No, I'm happy that you speak.
No, I was really, it was wonderful to see the summary of North Main. I know we've been working on it for so long. I really want to encourage Design Review and Historical Commission to apply for this. It seems like we have a handful of applications, and I would really welcome a more inclusive and get a general consensus from town and to present to town meeting with something that is robust and really well considered by multiple viewpoints. So yeah, it's online. Please submit. Love to include more people.
I'd like to support that as well, to have a representative from each of those groups on there. I think that would, I agree that it would help make a case with town meeting, if nothing else.
And I would like to second Emily's suggestion that not only do we encourage a member from the Design Review Committee and the Historical Commission to apply to serve on the ZRAC, but Emily's suggestion that they also get their neighbors, get their like-minded fellow residents involved in town government. I agree with Diab that civic engagement in our country is limited to a very small sector of residents, and it happens all the time in every town. And we need to broaden citizen engagement, and I think that is the sentiment behind anyone may apply. I'm really psyched that we started this process. I think Michael and Emily, you did a great job kicking it off. It's a complex subject and it's two projects that overlap. And we will be very grateful to have a zoning review advisory committee helping us reach the finish line. That's my feedback or input.
And the last thing, if someone still has the ability to put up Emily's slide of the schedule, I just want to remind people of what events are coming up next. I think there will be a presentation to the select board, I believe, 2 weeks from yesterday. That works out to be the 16th. And then our next ZRAC meeting is scheduled for the October 24th. And that is the same evening we have a planning board meeting. And I think what we're going to do is what we've done in the past. We piggyback them. We'll have the ZRAC first and then our planning board meeting after that. We're kind of running out of slots, so we've got to do that. Looking forward to the public meeting. That's going to be before town meeting. So I hope everyone out there in TV land who is viewing this in tape delay can join us then. Boy, I'm dating myself with tape delay. And then in the future, November 21st. And, I think that the planning board will also be having some, I would say informal, in that we won't be having our consultants with us, but we will be having listening sessions and discussion sessions over the course of the next several months, where we can hear your concerns and hopefully answer some of your questions. There are a lot of them. I think that Winchester, at least in terms of 3A compliance, is we compare it to some of our neighboring towns. We have much lighter lift to do to gain compliance. That doesn't mean it won't be easy, but it certainly means that there are some towns which have some really difficult, very, very difficult decisions to make. So in any case, I think with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And then I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Is there a second?
I can second.
Excellent. So where'd you go, Nick? Nick.
Aye.
Sally.
Aye.
I Ching.
Aye.
And I say aye as well. And as people leave the meeting, you all keep switching around on my screen. So I'd like to thank Emily Innes, Michael Lang, and John Rufo for joining us this evening. Thank you very much to WinCam. Thanks as always to our recording secretary, Nancy Polcari. Thank you to all the community members who joined us via Zoom and also on WinCam, and to those of you who will catch up with us later. Thanks, Taylor Herman, our town planner, and wish you all a good evening. And the planning board will see you all in a week. Have a great week, folks. Bye.